Alright, here we are in Unreal Engine 4. Thanks for sticking with me so long, folks. This should be our last video. I have a scene that I've already set up for this. It's using assets from the level, from the larger concept level that I created, just as background elements. I've already imported our mesh asset here, box haul. I imported it as an FBX, and I'll quickly cover some of the mesh and asset import process here with Unreal Engine 4. Essentially, you can select the folder that you want to put assets into. If you don't want to use the folders that are generated for you when you create a level for the first time, you can create your own folder simply by clicking New and New Folder and name it whatever you want. I always put my own custom assets in there to separate them from the ones that Epic provides us. And then to bring a mesh item or a texture into the engine, you simply click the Import button, and it'll open up your Explorer, and you find what you need. I find that it can be a little bit faster to do multiple imports at a time, which you can do from here, but generally I open up an Explorer window, and you can drag and drop any assets you want into the engine. For mesh items, you can use FBX and an OBJ format. FBX gives you more options for input for static meshes as well as animations. You can use OBJ, but you're limited to, say, one UV channel for OBJs, and as you know, Unreal Engine requires a second UV channel for light maps currently. So I imported our box as an FBX, and I will add that into the scene here by just dragging and dropping. Let me change my grid snap here to 50, and if you hold Control and I think it's page end, you can on your keyboard you can snap an item to the grid if you need to. Okay, so we have our mesh item imported into the scene here. Move this back a little bit. Okay, as you can see, it's dark because we're using the lit mode at the moment, and if you hold Alt and hit the number 3 on your keypad, you can go to an unlit mode. So you can see assets better, essentially, and it's quicker performance. So if you go into your custom, into my custom textures folder, anywhere you want to create store your materials and your textures, I've already imported our maps as well, using the exact same process that I just showed you. So essentially, I went into our Explorer, I found our textures here, our two textures that we created, drag and drop them into the content browser here in Unreal Engine, and it should import them with no problem if you followed the steps that I provided. So once you have the textures in your content browser, you can say right click, for example, on your diffuse texture, and you can say create material, and what that'll do is create a material automatically for you, and giving you the option to name it whatever you want. In my case, I named the material the same as the textures and the assets to keep things organized. And then if you double click on the material, when you create the material for the first time, all you'll have is this first texture sample here, which is will be whatever material you right-clicked on to create the asset. In my case, I created the diffuse. After that, let me just show you. Your scene will look something like this, and this will not be connected. So I'm going to break that link there. It should look something like this when you first open it, right? So you can just move this texture swatch out of the way. And if you remember from the previous video, we added the roughness map into the alpha of our diffuse map, right? So this white node here is essentially your R, G, and B channels combined into one noodle, going into your base color, which is going to be our diffuse or albedo map. It's all the same thing. In our alpha channel, we stored our roughness map, if you can remember from Substance Designer, and we also named the texture appropriately, so diffuse roughness, so we remembered which texture is in the alpha. So you can drag this the alpha node into our roughness channel like this. And then we can pick our normal map that we created in Substance Designer, drag it over here into the scene. And we can, again, take your white node here, which is your RGB values, and in our case it's our normal map, and connect it to the normal slot. And then the alpha of the normal map is our metal map, based on our naming convention here and what we did in Substance Designer. So you drag the alpha connection over to your metallic map, and you're going to see after a moment your swatch here will update to physically accurate material. If you don't want to see the default sphere here and you want to actually see your object, you can select your mesh, any mesh item here in the content browser, and then you click the teapot up here, and you will see that your mesh will update. Ours is turned around, so we're looking at it from behind. Give it a moment there. And if I maximize this window, it's getting cut off a little bit there for you. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Here and here, you can see our asset with its textures on it. Looks pretty. So let's save it, and then the engine's going to compile this information for us. Just give it a moment. And once this is saved, we can add the material to the mesh item in a couple different ways. If you want to add this mesh to many different, if you have this mesh distributed throughout a scene, all you have to do is double click on the mesh item in your content browser, and then right up here you have the option to assign a material. So if you go to your content browser and you select your materials list, and you sorry, in my case it's my custom textures, I select my box haul material that I created there, and with that selected in the content browser, you select this arrow next to your material for this mesh item, and it's going to automatically plug in whatever it is that you have selected in the content browser, as long as it's material. And if you hit save, anytime you import a mesh into your scene, this particular mesh into the scene, it's going to have this material applied to it. You can see I already placed this mesh there in the scene. So I'm going to go back to lit mode by hitting either Alt and the number 4 key, or up here at the top of the window you can select lit. And right now you don't see much on our mesh because we're going to have to build the lighting for this scene. So let me just do that quick by just selecting the build button here, because I already have lights set up here. Let me do this, and I'll pause the video. I'll activate you again when it's all done, so you don't have to sit here and watch it. Okay, there we have it. The lighting build has been is finished, and there's our asset. I know the lighting is probably a little bit dim, but it's moody, and in this case, moody works. So you can see some of the material information that we created here. You can see some of the scratches and the grime that we have around the edges and corners, and some of the material breakup, the rust here on the top. The resolution, again, it's a 1024 by 1024, so for an asset like this, it's not a hero asset. It's more than likely something that you're just going to walk by in a level, maybe to add some character or believability. You can walk by it pretty quick. You may not get any closer than we are here, and that resolution's fine. But still, you can see the way the surface reacts to the light here. Physically accurate materials, it's great. I mean, they will reliably look the way you want them to in any different lighting situation, whether bright lights outdoors or inside with dim lighting like this. So you have some nice grime buildup here that we created in Substance Designer on the painted metal. Again, to make this look a little bit messy. At the bottom you have some nice dirt, rust here on the pipe, and I like it. So essentially that's it. Now I have a little bit of, we're losing our hose here simply because this mesh was created to have the hose lie flat on a horizontal surface like this, but we have some a bit of a raised surface here, so ignore this. But essentially that's it. There you have it. We won't go into any other level building details for Unreal Engine now. That's out of the scope of what we're talking about. but it will take you quickly around the scene. All these other assets I created were using a very similar process. For example, the floor here was created using nDo, and then the same process as Substance Designer. And all I did when I say if I want to make another floor asset like this within Substance Designer, I create the normal map in nDo like I did before, or any program you want, and then I create a material ID map using the same process we followed, or again, any way you want. And then I imported the mesh item into Substance Designer, as well as a normal map and the material ID map. And once I plug those into my parent material node, it'll automatically generate details like this for me based on the normal map. I may have to rebake some maps as well if I'm using those to generate certain effects. But essentially, using the same graph I had before, I can create unique assets without having to paint them uniquely by hand in a 3D painting application. Not that there's anything wrong with those applications. I love them. They're fantastic. But when you're creating a lot of assets, you want to do it quick. You want to do it unique, and more importantly, you want to have materials that match one another. Right? You want a common theme. You want your painted metal to look the same, your gunmetal, your steel, your rubber, throughout a level, right? To make it tie in and be believable. So you can very easily do that in programs like Substance Designer as well as nDo. It gives you the same option to do batch texture processing by just importing an asset like a mesh item and then its unique maps, and it'll automatically generate these layered materials for you. This layered material process that we did in Substance Designer, you can also do something very similar in Unreal Engine. I enjoy doing it in Substance Designer because I can use the same process for another game engine or another 3D application if I need to. Whereas it's great to master the node editor for materials in Unreal Engine, but you are limited to using the engine in that case. So here, with these mesh assets here, I also used the same process. Right, so cables and cable ties and steel, all of these items. There you have it. I hope you learned something. If you want to know more about any certain topic that I breezed by too quickly, or perhaps I didn't cover something you want, just leave a comment, send me a note. I'll be happy to cover it. Thanks.